I'm going to call this meeting of the Gloucester School Committee to order. I'll remind everybody that the mission of Gloucester Public Schools is for all students to be successful, engaged, lifelong learners. And I will ask you to join me in the salute to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, with liberty and justice for all. Excuse me. This meeting is recorded by video and audio in accordance with the state open meeting law, consistent with the governor's orders suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law and banning gatherings of more than 10 people. This meeting will be conducted by remote participation. If you are calling in on a phone, you can press *9 to request to speak. If you're watching on a computer or a device, there is a raise hand button that you can tap or press to request to speak. Please use either of these options during oral communications to be recognized to speak. And we will move on to oral communications. And oral communications, the public shall have the opportunity at every regular school committee meeting to be heard under oral communications. Oral communications shall allow any resident who has a request or complaint of any nature relative to the school committee business to appear before the school committee, state their problem without debate, and the matter may be referred to the proper subcommittee. For items that are on the agenda, members of the public may address the committee with the permission of the chair. Persons speaking under oral communication shall be limited to 3 minutes each and shall submit a copy of their prepared communication to the recording secretary. The school committee chair shall not allow complaints as to individual performance or character. Okay. Maria, we need a roll call vote for attendance.
There's a hand with that.
I'm sorry?
I thought Eric Lay had his hand up. Maybe I was wrong.
Ms. Prince?
Here.
Mayor Taken?
Here.
Ms. Watson?
Here.
Ms. Weason?
Here.
Kathy Clancy?
Here.
Mr. Favazzo?
Here.
And Chairman Pope?
Here. The next order of business is recognitions. And would anybody like to start? Melissa.
I just wanted to recognize the drive-in graduation. It was absolutely awesome to watch each individual face come up on a screen and see all the kids that were graduating. It was actually more personal to watch it on a computer screen than it is at a graduation ceremony where we just get to see from a distance. So kudos to everybody that made that happen. And I know there was a lot of people involved. I thought it was very well done, and I'm very proud of the class of 2020 and happy that they got to have that first ceremony and looking forward to the next.
Anyone else?
Yes, I do.
Okay, Kathy. Safafia, I'm sorry.
Yes. Okay. I have Office of the Mayor, a special citation for Dr. Richard Sapphire. As the mayor of the city of Gloucester, I'm delighted to salute you on the occasion of your retirement. On behalf of all the citizens of Gloucester, and especially our children, I offer my sincere thanks for your 9 years of outstanding performance as the superintendent of schools. Your work has enhanced and strengthened our entire school system. A resident of Gloucester for over 30 years and becoming superintendent of schools, you brought an affinity of the community as well as your knowledge of educational opportunities. Your emphasis on elementary schools provide a unified, supportive approach to literacy, math, helping our younger students get off to a good start. You stabilize the budget while developing co-teaching opportunities to hire additional special education teachers. Under your leadership, the schools were able to increase the variety of types of courses, including advanced placement classes, electives. You set high expectations within a culture of respect and dignity. Your work has enriched the lives of our beloved children, therefore the whole community. I thank you for your dedication to improving the quality of life for the Gloucester students. Congratulations. Given under my signature and seal of the City of Gloucester this 26th day of June 2020, and the official certificate actually will be mailed to you.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you.
That was lovely.
Thank you, man. That was lovely. Anybody else? Kathy?
I also wanted to recognize Dr. Sapphire. It has been certainly a roller coaster over 9 years. We've had many, many highs. We also have had tremendous accomplishments, such as going from a level 3 district to, to improving that. Having our kids in the really low percentile in terms of elementary, and now we're almost the 60th percentile. You also took over for the West Parish project before the shovel was even in the ground, and that has been built, and it's been standing there now and educating kids for longer than you'd really think, because it seems like yesterday we cut the ribbon. And now we have another school, hopefully, that will become a reality for 2 of our elementary school populations, thanks to your leadership and dedication to our children. I think putting kids first certainly exemplifies everything that you have stood behind and tried to do, both in terms of hiring staff and educating our educators through professional development, and revising a lot of the curriculum has made very huge positive impact. I could go on. Your accomplishments are many, and what you leave behind is truly appreciated by everyone.
Thank you very much.
Anyone else? Laura?
So this,
Laura?
yes, no, so this, I just was also going to thank Dr. Sapphire. I don't have the breadth of experience with him of either the mayor or of Kathy or of others, but just a sincere thank you to you for all you've done, and the ways that you've helped me become a school committee member as well. So thank you for all you've done for our children and for our community.
And thank you again.
Anyone else? Samantha?
I just want to second what everybody said. I wish I had the opportunity to learn more from you, but I wish you all the best in whatever comes next in your journey.
Anything else? Am I missing somebody? Melissa?
No, I just want to thank Dr. Sapphire for his service. He's been here 9 years, which is much longer than most people last in a school district. So I congratulate on that long term. Gloucester has benefited in many ways of having you as our leader. And we appreciate everything you've done. And I wish you all the happiness in your retirement.
And thank you, Melissa.
Okay. Anybody else? Okay. I'd like to thank him for the good job that he's done. 9 years, as Melissa said, is a long tenure for superintendents in this day and age. And Gloucester has benefited greatly. The school children have benefited greatly, and the schools have moved forward in many aspects, and the groundwork has been laid for them to continue to move forward. So thank you very much. He made me promise not to embarrass him, so I'm going to stop there, and we'll continue this discussion at a later date. Okay.
Thank you, sir.
We don't have any student council. We'll move on to the consent agenda. Are there any items on the consent agenda that any member of the school committee would like to remove for further review? Okay, seeing none, do we have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
So moved.
Second.
Okay. Maria, can we have a roll call vote?
Ms. Prince,
Yes.
Mayor Taken,
Yes.
Ms. Watson,
Yes.
Ms. Weason,
Yes.
Kathy Clancy,
Yes.
Mr. Favazza,
Yes.
and Chairman Pope.
Yes. So the next order of business is our discussions on educational issues. We will take the update on the school closure and the superintendent's report together. And then we'll move on to committee reports because the budget discussion will come out of the committee reports, and we'll move into voting for that in that sequence. Okay, so Dr. Sapphire,
Great, thank you.
this
Chair.
is your last opportunity to just thrill us with
Knock them off their feet, huh? Terrific. Well, the governor apparently will be speaking on Thursday with respect to schools and the preliminary guidance principles that will be going out. And again, I emphasize the term preliminary because the Department of Education intends to continue processing it, working through it, and we'll probably come out with a revised set of guidelines sometime in July as well. But we think that Thursday is the date that we'll get that information. There is a grant that just came out. It's referred to as a Summer and Vacation Learning Program grant. It's designed to develop, expand, or enhance high-quality in-person, remote, or hybrid learning programs. It can be applied to this summer, the summer of 2020, but can also be applied to school vacations throughout the course of the 2020-2021 year. The district may be able to put something together for August. That's kind of up in the air, but my expectation is that the district will apply for the grant, and that will provide some funding for interventions and some remediation for students during vacation times throughout the course of the school year. Item number 2, emergency educator licenses. There is some recent legislation so that the Commissioner of Education can now issue emergency educator licenses to individuals who apply for them. Any educator whose process for licensing was disrupted by the pandemic can receive a temporary license effective through June the 30th, 2021. I think this is helpful because once we learn what the conditions are going to be on the ground with respect to staffing, if there is a need to find replacements or what have you, the Department of Education, through the legislation, is providing the means by which there may be more candidates available to fill some necessary spots. Item number 3, there is some legal guidance on staffing for this coming year. There may be some staff members who, to a variety of reasons or conditions, may be unable to return to work. Perhaps there might even be staff members across the state who are unwilling to return to work. So Long and DiPietro, the attorney firm, which they are the counsel for the Mass Association of School Superintendents, has put together a very extensive memorandum talking about the various different types of circumstances whereby an employee might not be available for work, and whether through the CARES Act or the FFCRA or any of the other legal means, what the accommodations might be for them. And you see in the superintendent's report, there are a bulleted list of the kinds of circumstances by which an employee may not be able to come to work beginning in September. So again, it's extensive. It's not to be used as legal advice for any particular employee, but it does lay out the basics between the types of absences from work and what legal recourse both the employee and the employer have as well. Item number 4, the expansion of the federal protections for LGBT, which came out by the Supreme Court. A very decisive and very important ruling by the Supreme Court. It does have implications for schools as well in the legal guidance that I had received. the recommendation was to look at our language with respect to anti-discrimination employment policies, anti-harassment training, et cetera, and to ensure that our documents are up to speed. And at present, although subject to immediate change, our statements and our policies on anti-discrimination and anti-harassment are up to speed because we've had coordinated program reviews over the last couple of 3 years. And based upon our corrective measures, we've ensured that, in fact, that they pass muster. That's the good news. The other news is that there are new Title IX regulations which deal with harassment and civil rights and the rest. And on May the 6th, the U.S. Department of Education Office of Civil Rights finalized new regulations, which means that our policies on sexual harassment and bullying and a number of related areas are going to have to be revised. This includes development and adoption of the new Title IX policies, some mandatory training materials for school personnel, and some specific training for a number of our coordinators, administrators, and the like. So there's new stuff coming on the way with respect to Title IX. The good news is that our special education attorneys, Nuttall, McAvoy, and Joyce, are in the process of developing Title IX policies, procedures, and training materials, which they will be sharing with the Gloucester Public Schools. I had sent out a notice and have been in correspondence with Michael Joyce, our special education attorney. And he also, at the same time, I had CC'd the new superintendent, Mr. Loomis, and Michael has also closed the loop by reaching out to him as well. So we should be in a good position to ensure that those new regulations are in place for August the 14th, which is the deadline when the legislation comes into being. The June retreat would have been last Friday, but not having the preliminary guidelines from the Department of Ed and having Mr. Lummis come on board, it didn't quite make sense for us to have the administrative retreat. Everybody was a little bit tired as well. So this gives them an opportunity in July, now that we anticipate that the guidelines will be coming out very soon. It gives them a chance sometime in early July to read the materials, come together in their retreat, and begin to understand what the applications are going to be like here at the local level, in concert, of course, with the committee that is being formed that Greg Bach right now is organizing. Which brings us to the reopening committee. And I think that the school committee is aware that we have in the process of putting together a reopening committee district-wide, trying to bring in as many stakeholders as we can, the purpose of which is to review the long-awaited preliminary guidelines for reopening that are coming from the Department of Ed and adapt those guidelines to the district and very possibly for each school as well, because there's more space in some schools, less space in the others. So how it's all going to work out is going to require a very intense coordinated effort, and we're putting the necessary process and procedures into place. You see listed here 12 different aspects, which may not be the complete listing of what needs to be looked at, but we see an overarching committee and a host of various subcommittees that will be looking at remote learning, health and safety, absenteeism for both staff and students, communications, physical movement, social distancing, various types of PD, social emotional support, special education needs, transportation, which nobody has an answer for at this point, by the way. And the preschool is going to probably require some custodial assistance in order to meet their EEC conditions as well under the school reopening guidelines. So it's in place. We're in the process of identifying who has which skills for which particular committees and which background, and the principals, of course, are going to be extensively involved in that process and procedure as well. And I think that's it for this edition, this last edition of my superintendent report.
Are there any questions of the superintendent? Samantha?
I'm just curious, you said there's sort of a number of stakeholders involved in the reopening committee. Is it appropriate, in your opinion, for a member of the school committee to be a part of that committee to sort of inform maybe some of our decisions?
Watch as I defer this to Mr. Bach, who's been working on this quite extensively.
And you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to be speaking with Mr. Lummis over the next couple of days, who will be chairing some of these committees and who I anticipate being the lead and or partner with me. So we'll get back to you shortly on that. My expectation is that there will be a much wider committee and subcommittees to include community members, parents, others, and that may be the place for the participation. This initial committee is for 15 teachers and paraprofessionals and principals to get together, and I see this as a core committee, but I do see multiple committees stemming out, and certainly something I would not defer to is that I think we all agree that with something this complex and this charged, that the more minds, the better. The more voices, better, and those who can communicate with the community. It's essential that they be part of it. So I would anticipate that. I'll just we can give you more details soon.
Thank you.
Melissa, you have a question?
Yeah, it's on the same lines on the reopening committee. The nurses had asked if they have a position on there. Is there one on the core group?
Two members of the nursing staff have applied. As I think Dr. Sapphire mentioned, I have not. 45 people,
Wow.
yes, wrote with interest. So that's the good news. And there were two nurses among them. In addition, I would expect the nurse leader to have a role as well. So we certainly will have representation throughout.
The second item on the list is health and safety, and there's a very strong likelihood that that would be, if not chaired, co-chaired with one of our nurses or the director of nursing.
I'm hoping that the city's also involved because there's a lot of work we have to do together. Just so you know, too, we're looking at replacing, Mike Hale's been working so hard on this to replace actually all bathrooms, meaning all toilets and sinks that are, you don't need to flush, you don't need to touch, those sensor ones, and the same thing through the whole school system and through the city. We're working on a lot of different issues. There's some issues that today I was talking to the Lieutenant Governor because they're actually trying to see if the numbers go down, that we actually can attend school, and how that looks is like, it's difficult. We're discussing, but I also want to bring something up that please, you have to understand something. We had paraprofessionals who had one-on-ones with kids, and sometimes these children would have an accent talking about special needs and the clause and the laws and the whole thing of discriminatory. We are going to look at, because you're going to have nurses are going to be in their office. They're going to be 10 to 1 things. We're looking, and I told the Lieutenant Governor, no one's thinking about this, but you better good and hard. We're going to have to look at extra money. If we remember, those of us who are old, we used to have like female janitors, hall monitors of females, and instead of always outside. If they're not going to be able to go outside constantly, then we're going to need more in school, because it's going to be mostly is, especially in the elementary, is sanitizing, washing the hands. If someone sneezes, the teacher's not going to run out. So we're going to have extra help, but we're also going to have to look at home health aides. You have a child who has an accident in the classroom, who's a special needs, they're going to have to be learned how to actually address those issues because of the COVID. You can't expect a teacher to run out, or a paraprofessional or a nurse, when they're going to have to deal with other children. So we're going to have to think about that. And you know what? They never even thought about that. Back in the day, Dr. Sapphire and I always discussed, we had some issues with some paraprofessionals and special needs. And he says to me, you just can't leave them soiled. And that's right. But there's training now. There's so many different things, different PPEs, different things. So when you do think about it and you do work together, please think of what's going to happen when we do have children who do have accidents. We do have special needs that have diaper changes, even though they're older. So I don't know how many are in the schools, but we're going to have to look at that too. We're going to have to hire some home health aides.
If I may just add to that, I know that there are districts that provide added pay for biohazards, and just being aware of that fact may be something that can be brought to bear or will be brought to bear.
Yeah.
Negotiations. So I think you can anticipate that being
We
changed.
have to think of all things that we have to, because you know what, the nurses are going to be dealing with the everyday things that they've always been dealing with, and the paraprofessional help in the classrooms doing their teaching, doing what they need to do. And who's going to step out, or if a kid has a runny nose, always, you know, you have a toddler, you have like a 6-year-old, a 5-year-old always, you know, sneezing. What's going to happen? Someone's going to have to go take them out, wash the hands, do what they need to do, etc. Some of them might be soiled or whatever. You're going to have to do all that. So I want us to all keep that too. Remember, when we're doing negotiations, when we're doing things, I don't mean to be Debbie Gloomer all the time as far as the budget, what's happening, what things that we'd like to see and could see. I'm trying to see what I can get now so we can get reimbursed for the CARE Acts together. I'm trying to look at all these things so when we do start, and if we're ready, you know, I'd like to be always proactive instead of, you know, overacting. And I know people are thinking I'm overacting. We're not. I'm constantly on with other Zooms and teachers and superintendents. I'm listening all the time. I'm listening to Department of Public Health, other communities, everything you can think of. And they all forgot that. And when I mentioned that, they went, basically, oh crap, and I went, no pun intended, but we didn't even think of that, because we're thinking about, you know, the students, the teaching, how we're going to do that, but we're not thinking of further along. So we'll get there. We'll be there. We'll work together. But as you do that committee, and as you do some of the things, Mr. Bach, remember that, and the same thing, like what Dr. Sapphire said, you might have to put extra, and they'll have to take training, because it's going to be a whole different kind of training, and to make sure that we have the PPEs and everything else too. So put that in the back of your mind too when we're working together. But they're hoping, if the numbers stay and they go down, that we will be hopefully some kind of return. So, all right, thank you.
Are there any further questions of the superintendent? Okay. I have one hand raised in the audience. Eric Lee. If you have something relevant to the report, I think it would be appropriate, Mr. Lee, if you'd like to speak. I will.
I think he's had his hand up since oral communications. We went into our roll call attendance, his hand up.
Okay, well, I'm going to give him the opportunity to speak right now, but I'm telling you, all my little buttons have disappeared. Usually I can unmute somebody, but I can't.
I can promote him.
Okay, because that's because I'm not a host. That's why.
Oh,
Rich could have. Okay.
I've fixed that as well, and he has joined us. Eric.
Thank you very much. Yep. Hopefully you can hear me at this time. It's a perfect segue. I had hoped to speak during oral communications, and I realize that the meeting's moving further. But I thank you very much, Mayor, with some of the things that you were bringing up, because earlier in the day I had sent to all of the members, including yourself, your resolution that other different school committees and other towns have passed as well. That really is just a formal acknowledgement of having to seek alternative funding through federal and state aid for the increased costs that would be present with returning to school during this COVID time. I won't read through the whole resolution, but I'm hopeful that you will go ahead and pass that. It is modified from input from not only teachers. And my name, of course, I should have introduced earlier, Eric Lee, high school teacher at Gloucester High School, biology and biotech. Also an advocate for proper school funding for all public schools, including Gloucester schools. And so I come to you in hopes that you will pass this resolution, since it was put together by student, faculty, also MTA, and the Massachusetts Association of School Committees has also come out on June 15th with a similar resolution asking, with the increased costs to be borne by the state, which I know you're moving forward to try to get, and also through the CARES Act, through federal funding then. So the resolution really would be to try to pass this resolution on to local leaders, our legislators, the ones in Congress as well, Secretary of Education, Charlie Baker, the governor, and all those things, that they fully fund public education to the level needed to maintain current staffing and fully fund the Student Opportunity Act, which was a big win in 2019. They worked very hard to get that passed. Now we've come into a crisis, economic and health-wise, and we realize that it's only going to come through an effort of multiple organizations coming together. So specifically, the Massachusetts Association of School Committee recommends that the Commonwealth should fully reimburse local districts for all COVID-19 expenses in the school reopening. There can be no unfunded mandates. And I hope that the city and town, city here will continue to maintain its commitment to fully fund our public schools, hopefully with the aid from the federal government. So the full resolution has been emailed to you. I would hope that we know that there's going to be increased costs with the COVID-19 era and coming back to school. And I close in favor asking the board to move forward, transmit a letter expressing their support to the state legislature, Speaker of the House, Senate, President, Governor, and any other members of Congress representing this district. Also, it would be a great thing, I think personally, for the taxpayers of Gloucester to know that we are all in a new era coming forward to try to seek advocacy from all. So I ask you that you do consider that resolution, and whether you pass it tonight or at a subsequent meeting here, I would love to hear back for it. And I thank you very much for the opportunity. I'd entertain any questions if you might have.
Kathy, you have a question?
Eric, I'm wondering if there is any time constraints that or target date that that people are hoping to have the resolutions submitted if the committee chooses to do so.
Sure, I think that's a great question. On the federal end here, as we realize, the Congress, the House of Representatives came forward and passed this. There seems to be a logjam in the Senate as well, but that doesn't mean our Massachusetts congressional delegation is all in favor of the CARES Act and other things that will come forward with that. So I think the sooner the better to let elected members know that we all stand together. I really believe that advocacy is something that comes in many different forms, but together we can be stronger in doing this. So I hope that we can move forward with a resolution like this. And I've tried to word it in a way that realizes that it's going to take a whole community to try to accomplish these things in really unheard of times.
Thank you.
Rich?
Thank you. Mr. Lee's argument and what he's asking for makes perfect sense. And I just want to add that it's complemented by what districts are going to be asked to do as soon as the guiding principles come out. Whatever those options are, all districts are required to do a survey of what the impact is going to be on the buildings as a result of the constraints that are part of those guidelines. And the purpose for doing that is to have the data so that the Department of Ed can then consequently go to the legislature and say that in order for schools to function, they're going to need a level service budget plus, based upon the information that all of the different districts have provided. So it sounds as though what Mr. Lee is trying to put together is something which joins forces with what we're going to be required to do once those guiding principles come out.
And we are taking up a resolution tonight, which was brought forward by Laura, and it touches on not all of the points that the MASC resolution does, but it does touch on some of them, in particular, the no unfunded mandate. So we will look at that and we will follow through on that. But also for your information, the CARES Act, we have already submitted a request for reimbursement, and I believe that is being processed, and that money will be coming back to us for monies that we have spent. So there's a lot of moving parts. I had a long conversation with John Dunn over the last week, and they're on the city side still trying to figure it out, because there's also FEMA funds coming in, and the FEMA funds only pay 75%. So they're hoping to go to FEMA first and then get reimbursement from the CARES Act for the remainder of things. And but we most certainly will look at this resolution, and because it's not on the agenda tonight, we will put it on the agenda for our next meeting, which is in 2 weeks. So that being said, we're going to move on for a vote on the superintendent's report.
I move that we approve the superintendent's report.
Second.
Okay. Maria, we need a roll call vote.
Ms. Prince,
Yep.
Mayor Taken,
Yes.
Ms. Watson,
Yes.
Ms. Wiesen,
Yes.
Kathy Clancy,
Yes.
Mr. Favazza,
Yes.
and Chairman Pope.
Yes, it passes unanimously. The next order of business, just to try to make some sense about how things fold out, we're going to take up the program subcommittee meeting of June 15th, 2020, and after that we'll go to the building committee, building and finance committee, and then we'll move on to the budget, and then on to the other action items. So Joel, would you like to report out on your meeting?
Sure. The program subcommittee met. We had discussed continuing topics of combating absenteeism and the high school start time. On the combating absenteeism front, Greg Bach gave us a report with his conversations with Attendance Works, and he proposed that there would need to be sort of an ad hoc working group dedicated to this. Both Sam and Laura graciously volunteered to join in that working group to help the community side for the input and the output that'll be required to move anything forward as the district continues to work with Attendance Works and figure out some strategies going forward. As for the high school start time, we discussed the pros and the cons. We discussed the available studies that are out there and some districts that have enacted it before. It seems to be overwhelmingly positive. However, we recognize that given everything that's going on, it was best to push this aside for now and see if it comes through as potentially a recommendation through the combating absenteeism, or if there might be other strategies that Attendance Works and the working group thinks would be more prudent to attack first. So for now, that's kind of, it might get discussed probably after the new year, as soon as we take it up again, but it'll most likely be looked at under the lens of combating absenteeism. And that is it.
Okay, any questions? Kathy?
Yes, I would hope sorry about that. I would hope as part of your discussion, given that school has been beginning at 9 a.m. now, I'd be curious what the participation / absenteeism is, and what that later start time has either positively or neutrally impacted attendance. I just think it's informative. So just
yeah, that's a good point. And that was discussed, obviously, comparing, starting online at 9 and starting in the classroom at 7:30 is kind of an apples and an oranges. But there was discussion about, because we're doing this, non-traditional scheduling, or we had done this non-traditional scheduling for the spring semester, and it may carry through in a different form to the fall. There was opportunities to explore whether, you know, a test run of sorts, as Kathy mentioned, the online stuff starting at 9 gives you some information. Again, it's not a straight comparison, but there definitely is some information to be gleaned from it. And we did discuss that for a bit. So thank you for bringing that up.
Okay. Anything else? Okay, we're going to move on to the Building and Finance Subcommittee meeting of June 17th. And Kathy, would you like to report out, and then we'll move into the budget?
The Building and Finance Subcommittee met on June 17th, a week ago, and the majority of our conversations centered around budget, so I'll mention things related to that second. But everything else in terms of where we're headed in, for the closing out this fiscal year is consistent with other reports from BNF that there will be money for prepay for special education, and other contingencies or other obligations, I mean, that we have. Expenses that have been incurred related to the pandemic and having the equipment have been submitted, so they do not show up so far in our current year-end results, but we'll see to make sure as things go on how many expenses we have and what that reimbursement is, and hopefully end up without an impact both in this current fiscal year and the coming fiscal year. But that is still out there as, you know, as an issue we need to keep an eye on. The other item that is probably of note is that food service has been operating at a loss, even though it improved a little bit. But the service of meals and having less participation from full paying students and just doing the remote service, the district has been operating at a slight loss, but obviously it's extremely important we continue to provide meals for these students. We just need to understand how it's going to impact us financially, and we'll keep an eye on that going forward as well. The other item of note is that we began a little bit of discussion on the memorandum of understanding regarding the Department of Public Works and the schools. And we determined that we need to get a lot of the background documents as to what had been proposed when we tried to address the memorandum and update it quite a few years ago. So that has been tabled and will be taken up this coming at the next meeting, so that we make sure that we both get, you know, provide what we would like to see in the memorandum of understanding as it's currently operating, as well as, you know, kind of the back and forth with the DPW to make sure we're all on the same page and with an agreement that serves our district and the city best. So those were the non-budget things. With the last thing is, can I make the motion on the transportation now? Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So we had more information on agreements with transportation companies. And so there are 3 transportation companies. We came to agreements with 2, and there's no agreement with the other one, so we're not paying them. So at the Building and Finance Subcommittee, we voted unanimously to amend the previous recommendation to the school committee to authorize the CFO to fulfill the out-of-district transportation contracts with LBK Transportation, Nix Luxury Transportation, and Mass Trans, and to authorize the CFO to fulfill only the contracts with LBK Transportation at 60.93% and Nix Luxury Transportation at 50%. And I so move.
Second.
We have a motion and second. Is there any discussion? This came up before, and there was, we didn't have all the information, so we tabled it. So what has happened is the BNF has basically amended their prior recommendation and eliminated what was the third company's name?
Mass Trans.
Mass Trans. And the reasoning is that these, we are trying to keep these companies on board so that when we need them, they're there. And for them to be ready to go when we need them, they have to have employees, and So we had to verify that they were still paying their employees. So that's what the information, the new information that we've received. And the two that we're recommending get paid are paying their employees, whereas the third one is not. So, any other discussion? Okay. Maria, can we have a roll call vote?
Ms. Prince,
Wait a minute,
Yes.
I had a question, please.
Okay.
So why are we paying them if we have no transportation? We're not doing anything?
We are for the same reason that we're paying other people that aren't working, so that they're there, so that we're not liable, so that they're there when we need them. That's the rationale.
Well, we're gonna have to start learning to change our rationale, because our teachers or paraprofessionals or whatever are gonna come back definitely. We don't know, or they're working at home, but we have bus drivers. I understand if they were ours, but this is a contract for someone else. It's not our own local bus drivers. This is a different company. You're saying for what?
They're special needs. They transport special needs
So you're
students.
feeling that if we
their
don't pay
schools.
with them, we will lose their contract, or we won't get them in September?
You
Or
might not,
they'll go out of business.
or when push comes to shove, they may take a different district before they take your kids, which could create all sorts of scheduling problems. This is an issue that has been discussed statewide, and there are a number of costs, operating costs, that these companies have and have paid, which has to do with repairs and mechanics, insurance. It's not just driving the bus, filling them up with gas, and paying the employees. And initially there were other bus companies across the state that were asking for 80% on the dollar, and we didn't face that. And the company that is not paying their employees, we have not provided them with any funding whatsoever. But in recognition of the operating costs, the insurance, and the like, 50% or 60.93% seems to be the consensus amongst districts as to what these bus companies should be paid, so that, as Mr. Pope said, when you need them,
Did we confirm they're paying their employees? Have we confirmed their employees aren't getting the stimulus package on unemployment? Have we confirmed any of that? I don't mean to sound negative all the time, but the fact is, other schools and other things, I'm talking to mayors, they stopped doing that. They did furloughs, pink slips for everything, and they're also stopped paying things. So I just want to make sure that I can justify myself on the budget side when I'm looking at this as a budget. I always vote present anyways for budgets, but so I can rectify, because you know what they're going to say, well, you know what, so didn't half of the businesses and everything else shut down. They had employees they couldn't pay. So we need to justify is why we're paying that. So you already said that. And we did confirm that they are paying employees.
Gary, can you respond to that?
Yes, we had them sign an agreement that said that they were paying their employees, as well as that they weren't receiving money from the PPP program.
Okay. Thank you.
Go ahead, Kathy.
So I also wonder if I should amend the motion to add at the end through fiscal year 2020, because it would seem when the guidance comes out from the Department of Ed that we don't want to be, we want to know that if it's going to be remote learning, I think the mayor is right. We, at that point we have to say, it probably has to be a different discussion or a renewed discussion as to, what we're willing and what people expect. Because at that point, it's a totally new normal, and I would not want to be on the hook to pay if there is no transportation at that time. We should discuss it then.
I don't mind paying for food, but there's a difference from food than it is for just paying for something. But if Gary said he checked it all, like I said, let's just vote for it for 2020. I always vote present anyways, and then we'll take it from there as soon as we get some more guidelines out.
Melissa, you have your hand up?
Yeah, it's my understanding there's legislation put forward to address this issue, because Gloucester by far is not the only community that is paying for services for transportation that they're not getting. So I believe they're trying to handle it legislatively.
That's why I'm asking, because some of them are stating in some towns, they took a vote, they're not, just recently, they're not paying, and some cities are not paying. So I want to make sure that let's do it for 2020, like Kathy said. She's on the budget and finance, correct, Kathy? And then, she knows what she's doing too. So we'll take it from there, and then we'll just go forward. So, well, in a couple of weeks, we just do it again. We waited this long. There's not a big difference. You're going to vote for, I'm going to say present anyways, but the fact is, so we have something going on, and they have some money coming in.
Gary, can you verify that these payments are for 2020?
Yes, these payments are in fact for FY20, April, May, and June.
Right. So that's, I don't know that we need to amend the motion, because that's what Gary just said that's what these payments are for. Okay. So is there any further discussion? Melissa, you still have your hand up? Okay. All right, roll call vote, Maria.
Ms. Prince,
Yes.
Mayor Taken,
Present.
Ms. Watson,
Yes.
Ms. Weason,
Yes.
Kathy Clancy,
Yes.
Mr. Favazza,
Yes.
Chairman Pope.
Yes. It passes 6 in favor and 1 present. Okay, now we will move on to the main event, which is the 2021 budget. We have a recommendation. Gary, are you going to take the lead on this, or Rich, or is Kathy going to do the committee report first?
I suggest Kathy provide the lead, and then Rich and I will provide any backup.
Okay.
Okay. So we had a lengthy discussion as to all the tenuous nature of the next school year and the needs and the learning environment that has yet to be defined. And we looked at the positions that have fit within the increase that the city gave us. And we had I think, a really good discussion about having some contingency for the uncertainty that's next year, but also zeroed in on what positions we think would have great impact and need that are within our option A that we had put forth in previous meetings in terms of what our recommended budget was. So I can make the motion, and then we can, people can ask questions, and Rich and Gary can, provide more information. But our recommendation was that the Building and Finance Subcommittee unanimously voted to recommend to the full school committee that we approve the fiscal year 2021 budget in the amount of $44,388,897, including the ELL teacher, the Gloucester High School Adjustment Counselor, one reading specialist, and the Gloucester High School ELL coordinator increase of time, and that the remainder of the money would be put into the main office contingency account. And I so move.
Second. Discussion.
I guess I just want to say what positions we felt we should probably be on hold for, because maybe depending upon how the summer shapes up and what the needs are and how things are defined, we possibly would consider some of these positions as opposed to leaving in a contingency. And those positions were an O'Malley ELL paraprofessional, a O'Malley PACE and literacy, halftime in literacy interventionist, an elementary math coach, O'Malley reading specialist. We did decide we would hire that because it's a net 0. So strike that because that's not relevant. And the Gloucester High School Coordinator of Special Education increase to that particular position, which was 11,740, and the Gloucester High School Special Education Program Leader, which was 5,853. So those are the positions we are holding off on. And the net difference gets us to that approved budget with all the additions and increases in our budget, plus the positions that are in the motion that we recommend get filled.
So Gary, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but my recollection is that what the net amount that we are going to transfer into contingency is about $190,000.
So can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so I looked up the contingency in the budget. It is $352,000. So it's about 152,000 added on to our 200,000.
So that money can be used for the unknown that we are sure to face, whether it's more guidance counselors or social or interventionists or adjustment counselors or tutors. We don't really know where we're going to be. So we have some money in reserve to deal with that and any of the other things. As the mayor said, we don't know what kind of expenses. Now, some of these expenses we may be able to get reimbursed for through the CARES Act, and FEMA, as well as what's the title? Is the Title I grant, Rich? That's I'm trying to remember the name of it.
I don't know if it's Title I, but if you're talking about the Elementary and Secondary Emergency Relief Fund,
yes,
what you're referring to?
Yeah, but it's
actually it is based on Title I. That's
based on
correct.
Title
It's
I.
not Title I, but it's based upon the percentages. So if to summarize, for the Coronavirus Relief Fund on the municipal side, there's about $140,000 one way or another that's going to be reimbursed, whether we put it into prepay or there's another arrangement. And I know that Gary's been talking to Mr. Coster on the city side. The ESSER is based upon, it's 80% of Title I. It's around $456,000. I think I've shown spreadsheets on that before, but it includes Chromebooks, it includes a whole host of PPE equipment and all the rest. Our estimates, based upon the smoke signals coming out of the Department of Ed and their recommendations for safety supplies, was based upon a 3-month allocation. And we anticipate that a 3-month allocation is, I forget now, is it about $150,000, Gary? Something in that neighborhood. So the question still arises whether or not all of that's going to be enough faced with the uncertainty as to what you may require as the school year unfolds over the course of the year. So one argument says that if you establish a little bit more of a contingency account, it's there for what you don't know you're going to have to spend. And this could change Thursday. I mean, Massachusetts, the rates for the pandemic are going down. We've heard repeatedly from the commissioner that their thinking is an amalgamation of what the medical field is telling them versus what they think and understand is going to be practicable in the field, in schools, and in the classroom. And they're very hush-hush at this point because I guess they don't want to get too much blowback. But it really remains to be seen what is going to come out on Thursday. So you're voting the top figure. To what extent you add the additional positions, to what extent you develop a contingency account, those in and of themselves are contingent upon what comes out on Thursday.
Joel?
Thank you. Yeah, I just want to say I voted in favor of BNF and I'll vote in favor tonight. I think as Dr. Sapphire just pointed out, we have no real idea how precisely this money will need to get spent. And so, and as we see at most of our meetings, there's always ability to transfer from one account to another if one area of the budget needs to be increased and one needs to be decreased. So, I think the budget is a good guess, and I wouldn't be surprised if it's close, but I wouldn't be surprised if it's off. I think given what little we have to go on, we go forward with it as it is, and make the best of it as the school year unfolds.
Laura, Samantha.
I just want to say that I'm appreciative that you guys kept to prioritize the school adjustment counselor at the high school. To me, it's such an important position, especially in light of what's happening right now. So I hope that it relieves some of the pressures that are facing the high school at the moment. So thank you.
Yeah, as much as there's a lot that's unknown, there are a couple of things that we can pretty much count on. One is that we're going to be getting kids back that have fallen behind, and also we're going to be getting kids back that are stressed out and have social emotional issues. So that was the rationale, was to hire that person now and get a good person and get them on board now, as well as the English language learner teacher that we know we're going to need that. So, because they do all of those things as well as teach language, because they're the people that can talk to the kids. So, any further discussion? Melissa, you have your hand up?
Yeah, I do. I just want to thank the BNF subcommittee and Dr. Sapphire and Gary and everybody else that was involved in the conversation that you had the other day when we discussed adding these positions back into the budget. It was very thoughtful and compassionate and realistic, knowing that we're actually just voting a bottom line, knowing that we'll have the flexibility to address whatever the real needs are going to be when we get there in September. So thank you all for the work that you did, and I will be supporting this budget.
Any further discussion? Okay, we have a motion on the floor, and Maria, can we have a roll call vote?
Ms. Prince,
Yes.
Mayor Taken,
Present.
Ms. Watson,
Yes.
Ms. Weason,
Yes.
Kathy Clancy,
Yes.
Mr. Favazza,
Yes.
and Chairman Pope.
Yes. It passes 6 in favor, 1 present. Okay, we're going to move on to the next order of business, which is a memorandum of understanding for the 2019-2020 school teacher evaluation. Rich, you want to? We have the document in our packet. No, you sent it out. It
I
wasn't.
sent it out. I'm sorry, I didn't get into the document. I don't know why, but I did send it out today. Greg, would you like to start?
Sure. This was actually a fairly quick conversation with the union regarding this memorandum of understanding. Evaluation, we left off on March 13th, and many of the key evaluation aspects would take place right around that time and a bit after. So we knew that a number of pieces of information, observations, all the evidence collection and presentation was not able to be completed either by teachers or by administrators. And we looked around for models of how other districts are handling it, and this was something that was shared with us from Triton Regional. It seemed to be very direct and straightforward, and essentially puts us on basically a bye year where we repeat exactly where teachers are in the cycle. It's a 2-year cycle for our professional status teachers, and if they were in year 2 this year, they would start again in year 2 again. So it's a repeat of the year that they are in. And one of the things that will be valuable about that is usually the first few weeks of school, teachers and administrators are engaged in the new goal setting meetings. to start the year, and there are required meetings that need to be put in place, and it's a pretty reasonable burden on the first month of the school year. If we were to try to do that in the fall, to have everybody create their new goals as usual, and come back to school in whatever variation we'll be in, that would be a real challenge. So by repeating the year, we are able to save some of that work that would have to be done in the beginning of the year with the creation of new goals. So we took the Triton example largely as it was, with a couple minor modifications, and this is what we shared with the union, and it seemed to be quite acceptable all around.
Samantha?
Greg, do you mind, just to help me better understand how it normally looks sort of in a typical situation? I don't know. I'm not familiar completely with the.
Sure. It's fairly complex. The evaluation system involves a series of formal and observations and informal observations. And, you know, some teachers who are, depending on where they are in the cycle and the number of years of experience, may have up to 4 observations. There's also, teachers have to collect evidence from among 4 standards. That evidence is submitted at the half year for some teachers and at the end of the year. So every year there is what's called a summative evaluation for many teachers. And then for teachers who are on professional status, it's a formative, but every year teachers receive some kind of evaluation based on a combination of observation by administrators, as well as fairly substantial collection of evidence for each of the standards to the administrators. Teachers were not able to, did not have the time, the usual time they would have to gather that evidence, nor did they have the required meetings, because we also have required meetings between the administrator and the teacher. So we felt it best to just repeat the entire process for this 1 year. And one of the clauses that we felt was quite appropriate is if a teacher had a really good observation, they might feel upset that did not count per se, that they could use the content of that evaluation as an additional piece of evidence next year, and sort of group it in there. Let's say you have a portfolio. It wouldn't count as an official observation. You still have to do the official ones, but it might be an additional piece of information to submit. And also, another big component of the cycle is goal setting. Every year for non-professional status and every 2 years for professional status, teachers need to, in conjunction with the administrator, have to create 2 goals, one around professional practice and one around student achievement. And those are, multi-step goals that are created and in conjunction with the administrator. And then those have evidence that gets attached to them and submitted throughout the entire process. And much of that sort of comes together at the end of the year, and we just didn't have that opportunity this year.
Melissa?
Greg, can we go back to talking about that clause about the observations in 2019-20 will not carry forward?
Yep.
So I understand how you're saying positive observations, they can carry the artifact forward, but what if there's a negative observation that can't be taken into consideration? They just start over as if the observation didn't happen? And I'm not trying to be negative on this. I'm just trying to understand
Well-
why their observations don't count, but yet for the teacher, if there's good in that observation, they can bring it forward. Just trying to figure out the rationale there.
Well, a teacher could bring forward a negative one if they'd like to. It's basically, it's a teacher choice. Teachers have the choice always to present whatever they would like that is relevant in the evidence in that portfolio. They can pick a range from anything that they've done. So, you know, to me, that was a sort of a logical piece of evidence that could be utilized. As far as, let's say there was a negative one that had not gone as well. The important piece is that all required observations would have to be redone. And what we wanted to avoid was, you know, any cherry picking or anything like that. It's just, we're going to redo them all. And whether you had a good one or a negative one, it still has to be redone. So it's a, you know, it's a repeat.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Greg.
Yeah.
Rich?
Thank you. There's another aspect to it as well. Let's say somebody does have a negative observation, then what's most important is that they understand what went wrong, what needs to be done to address the situations. And this is something that can occur over time, not simply because somebody goes back a week later, but they may be working on something really substantial about their practice, which could take weeks, who knows, maybe even months. I mean, the primary purpose of the evaluation is not entirely accountability piece, but the reflective process and the growth and the coaching that takes place between an administrator and a teacher. So if it is going to take time for them to improve on that performance and school closes on May 16th, you got a problem.
Yeah. And if I could add one more thing, the other thing was the abruptness of the closure of school. I did 3 observations the week of March 13th of that week. And typically I would have the opportunity to meet with the teacher and have the teacher provide, which really is quite often really essential, is the context. I may have seen something that I didn't understand, and so I could write that up the way I saw it. But quite often in the meeting afterward, the teacher may say, yeah, I had previewed that the week before, and so here's that piece of the puzzle. I didn't have the opportunity to meet with those teachers in any kind of proximity. The other thing is, in our current contract and agreement, if a teacher receives a negative observation, the observation must be repeated within 20 school days. And there was no opportunity for that either. So it just seemed on the whole, since that time in March was quite a busy time for observations, to have abruptly cut them off provided no opportunity for the typical follow through, and then no opportunity to re-observe within 20 days. It seemed to be best to restart the clock.
That makes perfect sense. Thank you all for explaining it.
Okay, is there any further discussion or questions? Kathy?
I just have a question as to the form. The second bullet point says first year educators will be marked as proficient for all 5 data points noted above, but there's nothing noted above, I don't think. So I'm just curious how that plays out in terms of an agreement.
The 4 standards and 1 rating.
That's an excellent point.
Oh, is that what it, Melissa, I think you pointed it out.
I think Melissa's correct that it's
Melissa.
Oh, yeah.
standards and then the overall rating.
Correct.
We can make sure that it should not have been in there, so we can clean that up.
Thank you.
Okay, trying to remember, did we get a motion on this?
I move that we accept the memorandum of understanding between the Gloucester School Committee and the Gloucester Teachers Association regarding the educator evaluation for the 2019-2020 school year. So it's last year, this year,
This year.
prior?
Second.
Is there any further discussion? Okay, seeing none. Roll call vote, Maria.
Ms. Prince,
Yes.
Mayor Taken,
Yes.
Ms. Watson,
Yes.
Ms. Weason,
Yes.
Kathy Clancy,
Yes.
Mr. Favazza,
Yes.
and Chairman Pope.
Yes. It carries unanimously. We'll move on to the next order of business, which is the approval of the superintendent's contract. This is the contract with Benjamin Lummis. We have already voted this in executive session. We have the cleaned up copy before us, and it was voted unanimously in executive session. Am I supposed to be able to say that? So we need a motion to approve the contract.
I move that we approve the agreement.
I
between
did
the
not
Gloucester
vote. I put present on that contract, so it wasn't unanimous vote.
Okay. I was trying to remember. Thank you for reminding me.
I move that we approve the agreement between the Gloucester School Committee and Benjamin Lummis, the superintendent's employment contract, in effect from, this says the 16th day of June, but it's supposed to be July 1st, 2020, for 3 years.
Second.
Is there any discussion?
Do we want to talk about the terms at all, or?
Well, Laura,
Just a technical point. If the dates are wrong, can we vote on it? If what?
we can,
I'm thinking it's I only had the copy that we were working off of, and I don't think I have the most recent one in my hand that Naomi did, but I know she changed the dates on the one that he signed.
It's in the packet, I believe.
yeah, there is a,
I
yeah.
didn't see it in there.
What is the one in the packet says the agreement made this 16th day of June 2020, which is the day that we met.
Maybe, okay.
And
Oh, yeah, the term has the right date.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. So this is the one that's in the packet, is the cleaned up copy, and is to the best of my, I looked it over. It reflects what I believe we voted on the 16th. So is there any further discussion? Okay. Maria, can we have a roll call vote?
Ms. Prince,
Yes.
Mayor Taken,
Present.
Ms. Watson,
Yes.
Ms. Weason,
Yes.
Kathy Clancy,
Yes.
Mr. Favazza,
Yes.
and Chairman Pope.
Yes. It passes 6 in favor and 1 present. And we will, at our next meeting, have a new superintendent. I believe he's going to make an effort to meet with every one of you between now and then. So, we wish him the best. Next order of business is the aforementioned resolution, which is in your packet. This was Laura requested this to be considered. It's fairly straightforward. Would you like to say anything before we make the motion, Laura?
Sure. Yes, as Eric Lee mentioned, so this is a resolution that's been passed by many school committees across the Commonwealth, basically just saying that the requirements, the things are what we imagine are going to be required to restart school in whatever form should be funded. And that, to put all of this on each district without any sense of funding doesn't really make sense. So this is just sort of a unified call for no unfunded mandates related to the COVID-19 crisis and reopening school.
Okay. Would you like to make the motion?
Sure. I move that we that we accept the school committee resolution on COVID-19 state funding as put forward by the Mass Association of School Committees and other school committees.
Second.
Okay. Is there any discussion? Joel?
So my question is, because this resolution doesn't identify any, proposed funding source, my reaction is, well, wouldn't this discourage, if someone adopted this, as the state said, we're not going to have any unfunded mandates, would it just discourage mandates because the state's broke too, right? Like this pushes in the wrong direction toward taking less safe reopening steps if the steps, can't be funded at a state level. For instance, in Gloucester, we just talked about the $350,000 of contingency money we'll have. The mayor's highlighted before, the city itself is in much better shape than the state is going to be. And so I'm nervous about this resolution that just says no unfunded mandates, encouraging a lack of mandates and a lack of protocol because there's no money to fund any of them.
Any, Laura?
Well, I hear your point, but I would work on the assumption that the state is not going to be pushing unsafe protocols, or is not. I mean, we have to work on. I think we have to work on some sense of trust that they're going to do the best in their ability to make good choices about how we can send our students back to school. It would be irresponsible to do anything else, and this is just a unified call from school districts around the Commonwealth to say, we're going to need funding for this. So that's how I read it.
Kathy?
I also take from it that the direction of what school is going to look like in the fall comes from the Department of Education, who are the educators and looking out for our students. And this is sending a message to the legislature, maybe to, know that we're obviously going to do everything we can, but that they can't put yet another financial burden on us. I mean, these resolutions are basically saying we're united in the fact that we need money to do what we need to do. So I agree with you, Joel, that, at some point does it, in reality, if they don't have money, it may not go anywhere. But I think by sending the message that we support no mandates unless they can fund them is a really good message we should always be sending to the state.
I'm going to vote present because the fact is I've talked to other mayors and they don't know if they're signing it. Because when you sign a mandate that you're asking for this is like saying, well, no matter what's going to happen, they're going to do, I'm going to be able to fund you 100%. And I can't just say that. I can't say that I'm on the school committee with you, but I'm also running a city and I'm already warning you what's happening with our budget. And the mandates, they might put these mandates, but doesn't mean they're going to fund them. Even if they say they don't, me by signing it, I already said that I'm funding every little thing. So I cannot sign this. So just so you know.
Melissa?
So I'm reading the language very carefully of what's before us that many other school committees have signed. And it just seems to me that if you listen to the way the governor is reopening the state, it appears that a lot of things are us being told what to do, but there's a difference between the mandates and the suggestions. And I think that if we sign this, it's just going to have the state be very careful and put a lot more thought processes into what they're mandating versus what they're suggesting or recommending that we do. So I think it's easy to say, yes, everyone has to do this, but when they look at the cost behind it, I think by signing this, it might make them look deeper and consider more before they make it a mandate rather than a recommendation. So I'm okay supporting this, knowing that they have to put extra thought into their mandate if they know they have to pay for it 100%.
Anybody else? Any other Joel?
I want to just thank Melissa for that distinction. It actually makes me more comfortable with this going forward. Making sure that if it's going to be a recommendation or a guideline, that's one thing, but for it to be a mandate, they really have to think about whether there's the money to do that. And so I'm okay. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Okay. Maria, roll call vote?
Ms. Prince,
Yes.
Mayor Taken,
No.
Ms. Watson,
Yes.
Ms. Weason. Looks like she left the meeting. Kathy Clancy,
Yes.
Mr. Favazza,
Yes.
and Chairman Pope.
Yes.
I just want to say Laura just texted me and said our internet went down. So that's the reason she's not here.
Okay, well, it carries 5 in favor, 1 opposed.
You can't count her as a vote with not voting.
Well, if she's not here, she can't vote.
But that's right. She's not there. So you're going to have to redo it if you really want her to vote until she can get
So why
internet.
don't we hang on and see if she can get
Yes.
back on?
I mean, it passed either way.
We just took a vote.
She brought this forward, so.
Have
Okay,
her call in or something.
we will put it on hold until Laura,
Yeah, because she legally didn't vote.
we'll give her 5 minutes or so to see if she can get that cleared out. I lost my internet briefly during this meeting also. I think everybody's online these days. Okay, so the next order of business is an update on MSBA and the East Gloucester Veterans School Project. You were all there yesterday, so what I'm going to report out is not for your benefit, but for the people in the audience. There was a joint school committee, building committee meeting yesterday. The purpose of the meeting was to approve the final price as well as the submission to MSBA for the schematic design. Now, the schematic design is basically it's not the bid documents, but it is the design. It's the building mass, it's the layout, and it's also the agreed upon estimate. So the bottom line on the amount of money that was voted, and I've been looking for my document, and I don't seem to have it in front of me. So this number isn't completely right, but my recollection is it was very close to $65,800,000. And I have some previous, documents that I know that we changed some things on. So the building committee voted unanimously to approve it, and the school committee voted 4 in favor, 2 opposed, and 1 present. But that vote is not a vote that is attached to the submittal. It's a vote to allow me as the chair to sign the submittal. So there's a difference there. The vote by the building committee is the one that has to be certified and accompany the submittal. What will happen next is today, the preliminary numbers went in, and they have until I'm going to say July 8th, but it might be the 6th, to put in the full submission. MSBA will take a couple of weeks to review that. There'll be an informal meeting sometime in the with a subcommittee sometime towards the end of July, and then they'll make their recommendations to the board, and the board will vote it on August 26th. And at that point, if they vote in favor of it, the city council will have to create a narrative and the words for the debt exclusion, which will go on the ballot on November 2nd, I believe it is this year. The other item that's still out there is the transfer of the property. I don't know that at last we heard Senator Tarr's office was working on the final presentation of the Article 97 disposition to go before the full legislatures of both houses of the legislature. If that gets voted, then it comes back to the city, and the city council, the mayor has to put forth a recommendation, and the city council has got to vote the transfer of the property. So those are things, those are all the things that are in the works right now. And that's where we're at. That being said, I would like to make a referral to BNF, that BNF start to investigate how we might go about developing a plan to keep these buildings afloat should this all fail. Melissa, you have your hand up?
I do. So I just want to clarify things a little bit so that the wrong message isn't being sent. You talked about our vote last night and how it was voted, and I'm wondering if you can just explain a little bit about why the number changed from what was originally put out there for the cost of the project, and why there was some confusion with what we were actually voting on, because the way the vote turned out, I think, sends a wrong message and a mixed message. And I think it's worth it to explain to anybody that cares or is listening or that wants to know why that vote was the way that it was.
Okay.
Because I'm sure there's many that would like to explain.
Before I start that, Laura's back. We're going to let her vote on her resolution. Maria?
Should I start the whole vote again?
No, everybody voted except Laura. We just suspended the it in the middle of the vote so that Laura could vote.
Okay, Laura,
We don't hear you. Give us a thumbs up.
Wait. There it is. I vote in favor.
Okay, so it carries 6 in favor. I'm trying to remember, and 1 opposed. Okay. So the question is, how did the number get down from the original 72 million down to 65? And there were a number of factors. One of the factors was there are a number of issues that were in the original figures that are certainly going to have to be done, but there will be no reimbursement from MSBA. And the decision on the part of the or the strategy put forth by the CFO as well as the administration was that we should, because we're not going to get reimbursed for those items, that we should remove them from the MSBA package. And those items were the building of the ball field, a new ball field, the replacement of the softball field, the demolition and renovation of the property at East Gloucester, not the renovation of the building, but the property, and as well as the swing space. There's no reimbursement for those. The logic behind that is that the goal was to get the cost of the building down as low as possible. A number of people on this school committee has questioned the high cost of the building. And the high cost of the building was reflected by these other costs that basically did not have anything to do with the building itself. So they eliminated that. That was approved by the building committee. There were other factors. The other factors were that we went through a whole process of value engineering, which is what they call cutting costs. And we eliminated a number of items in the building, none of which had anything to do with program or the space or the use of the space. So those were all things like using, instead of using precast concrete pavers in the walk areas, using poured concrete. Now, the pre-concrete pavers are already cured. So in the winter and when there's snow and ice, you can put salt on them. If you have poor concrete in place and it's green, it doesn't really set for a year or a year and a half. And so for those first 2 winters, you can't use salt on it. But so you have to use different techniques. The thing that most people use is sand. You use sand, it gets dragged into the school. But that was a savings of about, as I recall, almost $400,000. So the building committee decided to do that. There were a number of items like that. We eliminated some of the wooden ceilings in places. But at the same time, we had added some space. We added the space around the gymnasium so that there could be people in watching whatever's going on in the gym floor and not being part of the playing court. We also moved the stage up into the gym instead of in the cafeteria, and we raised it up, which added some square footage because you have to have 1-inch incline for handicapped access. So if you raise the stage, you got to have a longer ramp. There was a lot of things like that that we considered and that we voted. This we can provide a list. They were voted the meeting before, so they basically voted last Thursday. There was also some percentages that they had put in for contingencies that were more reflective of a renovation. That they had put in higher percentages, which for contingencies than you would need for a new construction. So we reduced some of the contingencies. So there was a lot of moving parts as to how we got down to that number. But I'll say it again, the strategy was in order to get the override, the debt exclusion override passed, it was the consensus of the committee that the people who would be opposed to this project are the people who don't want to spend the money. Now, the city has agreed, and the mayor has agreed, and the CFO has said that they will put forth funding sources for all of those other items on which will not be part of the override, the debt exclusion override. So I don't know if that answers your question, Melissa, but.
No, it does. Just like I said, I think there was a lot of confusion with all that went on last night. So I think it's just helpful to clarify for anyone who's listening.
Okay. Samantha?
Is it an okay time to my vote?
I didn't hear what you said.
Is this an okay time for me to speak to my vote last night?
Go right ahead.
Thank you. So as you know, I have always been a very outspoken advocate for this building project and the need for new school buildings even before being elected into the school committee. I am very much in favor of this project and its design. I applaud the building committee for their commitment to this process and their clear commitment to the best possible educational program for the young people in our community. My no vote last night was guided by my belief that whatever plan that we vote forward should always take into consideration how to best ensure community support for this project. Had I understood that a no vote could hinder the success of the project in the eyes of MSBA, and had I been given more time to understand the rationale for the change that guided my concern, my decision would have been different. I will say it again, I fully support this project and will continue to be a vocal advocate for it as a benefit to the community. And I've submitted a letter to the MSBA explaining more in depth something similar.
Laura?
Sorry, I'm using my phone for this for the first time. So
We can hear-
can you hear me?
Yes, fine.
Okay. So I also wanted to speak to my vote last night. I voted present because I was unable to attend the beginning of the meeting and I missed the presentation. And it felt imprudent for me to vote not having heard the presentation. If I had understood that my present vote could have been mistaken for ambivalence or not full support of this project, I would never have done that. That was a pure mistake on my part. I 100% support this project and the design and all the work that has been done by the school building committee. And I support this project because our children really, really need it. And it'll be great for them and for our community. So if I could vote again, I would vote an emphatic yes. But unfortunately, I didn't understand the meaning of my present vote at that time. So I have also submitted a letter to MSBA expressing what I've just mentioned here, and pointing out my emphatic and consistent support for this project from the very first moments that I heard about it and that I decided to run for school committee, and I will continue to advocate for this project in any way I can.
Okay. As I said, the vote of record is the building committee vote. That's the vote that is got to be certified and submitted with the submittal. Our vote by the school committee was to allow me to sign the submittal, which is required. The superintendent has to sign it and the mayor has to sign it. That being said, it's what people need to understand is that the MSBA has a clipping service. They pay attention to all the news. They have, and they listen to everything that's being said about the schools on social media. They understand what's being reported in the papers. They are very hesitant to support projects where they don't think there's community support. We have spent a lot of time explaining the things that we've had to do for communities to make what's going on known to the community. That's why they pay attention to what's going on in the community. They're not going to support projects that are not going to happen. And if there's dissension in the community, that's an indicator that the debt exclusion override may not pass. Now, that being said, this is we're still moving forward. We're still doing everything we can, and we don't know how all of this will play out. But they always look for, and from the school committee, they expect a unanimous vote. Melissa?
Thank you for that explanation, Jonathan. So my understanding, you just referred to BNF, the work to do to determine what happens if this project fails and the amount of work needed not only to repair the schools, but to bring them up to have adequate space so that we're not addressing special ed needs in a hallway. I just hope we can have a conversation about communication, because I think as soon as those conversations start, we need to get the information out, because I think there's a lot of people that don't realize the consequences financially if this project doesn't pass. I mean, some think, and rightfully so, it's a lot of money to spend on a new school. But when they realize what we're not getting and what the actual cost will be and how we'll have to pay that immediately, it could change the conversation a little bit. So I just think it's time that the community start getting educated a little bit more on the consequences of the school not passing, so that we're fighting for education and not failed. So I just hope we have that conversation about keeping that communication very quickly out of any information that BNF discovers, instead of waiting for minutes and waiting for other meetings to be updated. There has to be something immediate as soon as the information is available.
Most of the information about East Gloucester School is available. It was done as part of the preliminary
Schematic report.
schematic report. As well as we had, way back in 2014, we had all of our elementary schools assessed and looked at. So that we have some information. So that's why I referred it to BNF, so that we can, they can start putting together how we're going to approach putting that information together. Joel?
So based on what I heard tonight, I would assume there'd be no issue if I also wrote to the MSBA explaining my vote, seeing as 2 school committee members have already done so.
You can do what you want, Joel.
Okay, I just don't want to be accused of, breaking any protocol if I do that. Thank you.
Well, when you voted, when you wrote to the state legislature, in not being in favor of the Article 97, you did break our protocols and our policies. Samantha?
So Melissa, just to clarify, when you say make sure that we get this information out into the community, I'm assuming you don't mean like people having to dig through a report to get it. So I guess, is there a way that we can streamline the information to make it easily accessible for people and easily digestible? And is that something that the communication subcommittee should take up? That is, I think, really, really important, because, not many people are going to dig through a report to find out how much it's going to cost.
Kathy? Kathy?
I just want to go back to what our protocols are. I thought that when the committee votes in favor of something, it's our obligation and our agreement to support the vote of the committee. So it would be odd to me for Joel to send a letter to the MSBA as to why he does not support this project. I mean, I realize he's an individual, but the reality is the committee positively voted for this project, and it just seems wrong. It seems more detrimental, I think, to the project and to our work as a committee, and a positive vote. I would say it's absolutely not appropriate, in my opinion. So that's one thing. Second thing is, for the information, I think we need to, take those reports with the dollar values assigned for what East Gloucester would need and what veterans would need. That information is easily grabbed. I mean, obviously the details are long, but the details of what would need to happen don't have to be out there. I think everybody knows when you have a building for 240 kids, it's a pretty big heating system that would need to be replaced. I do think there are other pieces in terms of that communication that, East Gloucester, that's probably more equally compelling to cost, which is that some days it's freezing and some days it's really unbearably hot and the kids are asleep on the desk. And I know it's been out there and talked about, but you're right, we need to continue hammering home, because my concern, and I'm completely in support of every decision made on this project and where it is, what it is. I'm equally concerned that our students and our staff are going to be in buildings that will fail around them. And just like West Parish, who went, 3 or 4 days, Melissa, without heat prior to us pursuing the project, those kids could not go to school. And you know, I don't know what value you put on that, but let me tell you, if you were a parent of one of those kids, and if you were a teacher working in those environments, and you're trying to educate kids, those are intangibles that are really, really detrimental to the whole learning process, and frightening, quite honestly, when we talk to Mike Hale about our modulars that we have, and we have modulars at both schools. I mean, there's just a whole host of reasons and things that that kind of communication would include.
Samantha?
Laura, I think, had her hand up first, so.
Okay, Laura?
Thank you. I want to make 2 points. First, my letter went to Tom Ellis. Let me be clear. So my letter, I did not send something directly to the MSBA. I've given something to Tom Ellis, and he will put it with the appropriate submission. So let me be clear that it's part of a project and not an individual letter, to clarify.
Mine too. Thank you
So,
for that clarification.
Yes. So it is not something coming from me as an individual. It's coming from me as a school committee member who deeply regrets a misunderstanding that she had last night and during this vote. Secondly, on communication, Melissa, I take your point extremely well, because I will say that any information, the information is not easily accessible. I know it exists. I know there have been numbers crunched for years on this. It is just not easily accessible. You need a one-page handout with bullet points. There are ways to communicate. I'd be happy to bring this to the communications committee if the school committee believes it's appropriate. Kathy, what you were saying about school conditions, all of that is critical, but needs to be put in a form that people can access easily with very, very clear information. And that just hasn't happened yet. I think the information's there. I think the reasons for building this new school are so overwhelming, and there's no question about the need and the deteriorating conditions that our children and teachers are enduring. But we do need to do a much better job of communicating that. So.
Samantha?
And just to piggyback on that, during some of our superintendent interviews, I heard, I want to say it was Ben Lummis, say that the importance of getting parents involved in getting sort of people on board with this was super, super important. But I worry that with what's happening right now in the world with the pandemic, that the bandwidth of our parents is going to be quite small come this fall. And so back to Laura's point about making information more easily available, I think that's up to us, to make sure that people have the right information and that it can be distributed easily, because we don't know the pressures that parents are going to be under come the fall. And I think that we would be mistaken to assume that they're going to be able to have the bandwidth to really put a lot of effort into this. And I know that they support it, but whether or not they're going to be homeschooling or half homeschooling is going to really impact their ability to demonstrate a full commitment to this.
Melissa?
So, Jonathan, as chair, you created the ad hoc communication subcommittee, so I'm just hoping with what you're hearing, you'll consider adding a charge to that subcommittee so that we can get to work right away on figuring out how, and then we can probably attend or observe BNF meetings and have a plan to get information out right away. So I'm just hoping that you add that charge to the subcommittee so that we can get the communication started as soon as possible.
Okay, the school committee approved the ad hoc communication subcommittee. I didn't create it myself. But certainly I would think that this is information that they could regurgitate to this. It is difficult to find, but it's all, a lot of it's already there. And if you want to review it, I can put all of it in your hands to take a look at and see if you can want to wade through it and try to get the essence out of it and summarize it into a more palatable or communication to the community.
I think it was actually Laura or Sam at one point that said like a simple fact sheet, you know, just getting it on one page just to put in people's hands, you know, something like that. I think would be a place to start.
Well, there's no reason that can't be done. Rich? We can't hear you.
Sorry, there's a pretty good description of what's wrong with these buildings, going back to the original statement of interest, which is what got us placed into the eligibility period in the first place. And there have been some presentations early on when the school building committee was looking at 14 different options. And there are graphs and charts that show what the potential costs are if we have to continue to renovate these things. So the materials are all accessible. I'll do what I can to help as well. And it certainly can be put in digestible form.
Okay, I just, before we go on, I perhaps was a little nonchalant when I responded to Joel about whether he could send a letter to MSBA. So I just want to remind him, I assumed he was going to send a letter saying how much he would love to see the school built. But the school committee member authority, which is file BBAA of our policies, and Article 7 says to accept the will of the majority vote in all cases, and to remember that he is one of a team and must abide by and carry out all committee decisions once they are made. So using that as your guideline, Joel, have at it. You want to say something, Joel?
Yes, no, I appreciate the guidance on that. I was just looking for the clarity on that. To the point about the school conditions. So again, you know, this came up in yesterday's meeting and it's going to come up tonight and it's going to come up going forward. You know, I think one of the reasons the vote went the way it did yesterday was because there was an unwillingness to have a conversation about all the issues surrounding this project. And if we're not even going to have them amongst ourselves, and I mean, I don't see how we're going to get the community buy-in on these issues. And so just, you know, would caution that in order for this to be successful, the approach that's been taken so far, you know, this isn't West Parish where you just have to, you know, kind of get the mayor to lean on the council and you're through. This is going to require voters who are, you know, again, aware of what's been going on in the city and what's been going on with the schools. And there's going to be a lot of marketing required. And if we're not willing to have those conversations, and if we're not willing to look at, you know, pros and cons and have honest discussions about why on balance this project is worthy of going forward, even if not perfect, then I don't think you're going to get the buy-in from the citizenry that's going to be required to move this forward. So I just hope that in the future, as we discuss it as a committee and as we go out into the community and discuss it, that, you know, we look at every aspect of it to make sure that we're having a rounded discussion. And if the facts bear out that this is a worthy project, which I believe they will, then, you know, that'll be the most transparent and effective way to get people on board.
Samantha, you had your hand up?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I just want to say that, like, I appreciate that we're spending this much time having a conversation about this project, because with everything else that's been happening, the pandemic, the superintendent search, it's certainly not been top of mind. And I have felt that the updates have not necessarily been robust. And I think the more that we can engage in these conversations, the more that I think that I can learn, because this is a very complex process, and it's certainly new to me. And so I hope in the future that we can continue to engage in more meaningful conversations around this process, and how to get people on board, and to make sure that we as a committee feel as informed as possible about what's happening in the building committee, because, you know, I would like to make it to every single meeting, but that's not a reality. And so we have these updates for a reason. So the more robust that they can be, the better. And I will do my part to ask more questions and be more engaged. But I appreciate us having this conversation. And I hope we have more.
Kathy?
I just want to go back to, yet again, Joel saying that we're not having candid discussions about the issues. I think the building committee and the school committee knows that when you are doing a project, there is not going to be any ideal solution unless you have a blank slate of property where you can put, that's owned by the city, that you can put a building, and it's an infinite size. And so I don't see quote unquote issues. And I know you believe deep down within you that everybody that is associated with this is flawed and everything's flawed. And I don't think that portrayal of things is fair to the process and to the professionals and to the volunteers and the city staff that have put a ton of time in this. And so as we're going forward with communication, it's not to say that this project is perfect, but that this project will work and provide a really great educational opportunity for all the students and staff that will be impacted by this. And you know, it's not to say when someone says, oh, I'm concerned about traffic, that we say, oh, there's no traffic problem, but we say, we have done this, this, and this to minimize the disruption, to maximize the space on the property. But there's no field. Well, we know there's a field at Green Street. So as a community, we are trying our hardest to have the proper open space, but we still need that school for our kids, and we need to have our school somewhere. So those conversations don't ignore, I think, the challenges and maybe the trade-offs that are involved in what's been put forth. But there's always going to be trade-offs, and there's always going to be solutions that work to the best of what's in front of us and what's available. And so to me, I see it as the glass is half full or 90% full, not that we're missing out on 10% of things. I just think we need to put as best of a story about what this brings and why it brings it, and clearly be able to answer those concerns, because people will have those concerns, and they may still have concerns on the day they vote, but we should be able to at least educate them about how we've tried to address some of those concerns.
Melissa?
Kathy, you couldn't have said it better. And I just want everyone to take a minute and reflect, why did we run for school committee, and what is our purpose? To advocate for kids to be in safe, thriving learning environments. And that's what this project is about, and nothing more. There's got to be a compromise. We live on an island. There's only so much space on this island. Nothing is perfect. Nowhere, it will never be perfect. But there's compromises to be had. But we have to remember, like every single superintendent candidate said, kids first. So I just feel comfortable, and I can sleep at night knowing that the votes that I make and the support that I give is for kids, all kids in Gloucester.
Okay, is there anything else? Joel?
Yeah, thank you. So again, just to, respond a bit to Kathy's points, which I take, again, and Melissa's points, I actually kind of piggyback onto that. I agree with Melissa's philosophy that the root, genesis for this is for the kids, and the aim is to further the educational program of this district. But the reality of this project is the majority of people, we need to vote in favor of the override are not going to have children in this school system and may not share our, our gut drive to serve, the educational process. And so it is incumbent upon us to realize that although we have a mission, if the broader mission is to get this school built, then we can't simply rely on what's motivating us. I look at the price tag and I look at the condition of the schools and I go, well, no brainer, right? We got to do something. I see the $18 million just to keep East Gloucester alive. I get all that, but that doesn't mean that everyone else is going to. And so to just kind of, push it aside. And the example I'll give is at yesterday's discussion, I was saying, hey, listen, when I was asking to put the money for East Gloucester back into this project, I said, I was of the opinion the city has had a bad track record of doing what they say they're going to do, and that's absolutely required to do it. And I was nervous that I was not the only one who's going to have this opinion. And the response was, we're not here to talk about, I4C2 and other things. We're here to talk about this school and educating the kids. And you're right, this is about this school and educating the kids. But unfortunately, what the city has done with I4C2 is going to weigh on how people vote for this override. Unfortunately, what the city did with Maplewood Avenue and with Fuller is going to weigh on how people vote for this override. And so if you just try and push that aside, or push me aside if I bring those issues up, you're not serving the kids ultimately, because you will end up with a bunch of people upset, at the ballot. Just tonight, I mean, again, Kathy, I'm not trying to pick on you. I know you're tough, so you can handle it. You just said, unless, nothing's gonna be perfect unless you have this site with infinite space, you voted to surplus 10 acres of educational land in 2011, right? Like we had it. We had a big field we could have built on. The school committee surplused it. So if we come with that kind of reaction.
Here it is again. Here we go.
But no, hold on. See, again, but this is, I'm not the only one who's going to have that reaction. So although the response may be, hey, listen, sorry, we have limited space, don't think that people aren't going to say, you only had limited space because you got rid of the big space you had, right? That is a realistic response that will come from many of the voters you need to support this. And so we just need to do a better job of having these frank conversations as a group, so that when this goes out to the community, we are prepared and have a legitimate and honest, but nevertheless, effective message that says, yeah, you know what, you're right. We did have that space and we made some choices that ended up with having limited space, and you have the right narrative, right? Just pushing it aside or acting like it didn't happen, that's not going to fly to getting this project done. I'll leave it at that for now, but we have to have these conversations together and not be upset about addressing warts if we want to be prepared to get this through.
We have a motion to resign, adjourn? Or are we going to keep?
I make a motion to resign, rejoin, and anything you want to say.
I think Laura had a question or a comment.
Laura?
I do. I'll make it brief. I think that Joel makes good points. Kathy makes good points. I have the benefit in some way of not having been here when those earlier decisions were made, but I believe very, very strongly that if we can have these if we can honestly answer these questions, the overarching need for this school, schools are not only for parents and students, they're for a community. This is for the community of Gloucester. This is for what we tell ourselves we are here in Gloucester and how we treat each other and our kids. So there's a much bigger message here than how this, this is just, for a small thing about people who send their kids to school. And yes, there will be people who will never vote for this, but there are many, many, many people who share the significance of having good, solid buildings that are safe and well-built and well-structured to educate our children. And our children doesn't just mean children in those families. It means this community's children. So I think it's incumbent upon us to have these conversations and to be able to communicate clearly to the community as a group, as a committee, as a team, why we feel so strongly about this. And if there are warts, yes, there are warts. And here's how we discuss those. Here's how we can resolve those. But I don't think that fighting within us gets us anywhere. What we need is schools for our children. And this is an amazing project with an amazing chance to create a school for two groups of children, two current schools. And I think if we can focus on that and focus on communicating the message to people who don't have time to dig through like Byzantine websites to find information that can be presented in a much more succinct way, I think we can do that. We have the capability to do that. We could do it together, and I think we can be very successful.
Do we have a,
Amen, Laura.
do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Okay. Roll call vote, Maria?
Ms. Prince,
Yes.
Mayor Taken,
Good night, yes.
Ms. Watson,
Yes.
Ms. Weason,
Yes.
Kathy Clancy,
Yes.
Mr. Favazza,
Yes.
and Chairman Pope.
Yes. This meeting's adjourned. Thank you all.